And we go straight on to the next presentation, which is Frieda Taub, School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences, and you are emerita, theoretically retired. I like the theoretical there, and I realized that you're not actively retired, so to speak, or passively. You're still active, I mean. And the presentation is overcoming the yuck factor of converting human wastes to human needs, oxygen and food. The floor is yours.
Okay, it should be coming over in a moment. No, come here. Just
yeah, we can see it. It's not the presentation, it's the...
No, I can't hear you. Just what?
Right here. On this side, on this computer. It's on the... You can
bottom right.
Just... We'll get there in a moment.
Yep.
Okay, can you see it?
We can see it, but it's not the presentation, it's the... there, yes.
It's not in presentation mode.
I'm clicking on I thought was supposed to be the right
Yeah, try F5.
yeah, I don't know. Are you seeing it at all?
Yes.
Yeah, we're seeing it, but not in presentation mode.
Well, we're just going to have to. Okay.
If you
I
go
apologize. Anyway,
if you go up to slideshow,
There is a little box on the top left saying slideshow and resume slideshow. It might have gone stuck there, yes. Just click resume slideshow, might work.
well, I'm clicking on all the right things and it's ignoring me. So let me just go.
Yes.
So there's been lots of discussion about biological inputs and outputs, but after you flush the toilet, there's still going to be a lot of what I call housekeeping water. So you're going to have lots and lots of accumulated waste. I mean, even just considering the amount of input and output for a person who's at steady state, you're going to be accumulating a lot of material. And if you don't have a reprocessing system, you're going to be in trouble. Okay, so why am I not going to the next? Okay. In modern societies, we don't talk about dirty diapers. We don't talk about sewage. In primitive societies, they used human and animal waste as fertilizers with potential pathogen transmission. And we tend to think of these societies as primitive. We tend to hide a whole lot of stuff. So there are only 3 processes that are required. You have to have primary production, and the systems I'm going to talk about are the kind that we're accustomed to in terms of aerobic systems. There are some anaerobic systems, some of which were mentioned by Colin. You've got to consume that material, and you've got to recycle it if you're going to continue to have primary production. I'm going to spend just 2 slides on my research because I can talk about it for long periods of time. If we have algae without grazers, essentially we start with some nutrients, we get a big burst, and then the system kind of dies down. The Daphnia, essentially, where we have them, will have a population peak, and then the system kind of runs down. If we add nutrients in an intermediate stage, we'll get a big burst, and then it kind of runs down. The Daphnia populations kind of run down. And with a monitored system where we can measure pH, oxygen, and some other things, we can kind of see what's happening. And with low nutrients, we get reasonable pHs with high nutrients. So my original assumption that if I wanted to have a closed ecological system that would function well, I want to give it lots of nutrients, was wrong. We really want to work with very low nutrients. I might also say in terms of the system running down, what we think is the problem is recycling, and it may be that we have to include an anaerobic stage, which we had not thought of. Now, in terms of a life support system on the moon or anywhere else, including Earth, there are kind of two approaches to nutrient recycling. The wastewater gardens, and Colin's presentation is an example of a system that depends on naturally involved consortia. So you assume that if you go to a wetland or you go to a garden, that the microbes there are co-evolved to be able to recycle nutrients. So that's one approach. You use nature, you use the idea of self-evolved populations, or you can try to design a system that optimizes the process that you're trying to work on. And so what I want to spend a few minutes on, or most of my time on, is reviewing from current to earlier studies, because we're not starting at ground zero. Those of you in Europe, I presume, know about the European Space Agency's Melissa program. It's the Microecological Life Support System Alternative. So that's what Melissa stands for. The idea is to have crew, and then they have a series of compartments, and within each compartment, they try to optimize the physical pH, oxygen, lack of oxygen, whatever the requirements are for that system to be working optimally. And I'll just show you that again in another format. This is looking, for example, at the nitrogen cycle. You're going to have a crew member. There's going to be various kinds of waste, including feces and urine, sweat, skin, goes to a waste treatment plant. The waste treatment is going to lead to food production. The food production is going to get fed to the crew member. So this is a complete cycle, and it's been underway for more than 20 years. And a lot of their information is publicly available. So again, it's just their compartment, which is anaerobic. Then they're going to break down the products that resulted from the first process. This is going to break down the products from this process, and eventually you're going to produce food. For those of you who are interested in the Melissa program, they're going to have a meeting October of this year in Spain. I do not believe that it's going to be on Zoom or on the web. So for those of you who are in Europe who can go to that meeting, that'll be great. But a lot of their information is available on the web. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the fact that Japan spent a considerable amount of time. This is the book. It's a 500-page book. I do not know what the current status of the Japanese system is, but they put an enormous amount of effort into studying two-phase systems. They considered their system kind of like a biosphere J for Japan. They had two modules, one for plant cultivation, another, I mean, they had goats, they had rabbits, they had chickens. So if some of you are considering a life support system for the moon, you may want to look at the Japanese studies. Lots and lots and lots of detail. The Russians have also spent an enormous amount of effort, way, way ahead of the US. And a lot of the Russian results are summarized in this book. Little bit of the American system also, but Gittleson was in charge of the Russian system. And one of the things that they found that you would not have known ahead of time, which I think was very important, was one of their problems was getting rid of, they were growing wheat. And so when you look at things like wheat, you're harvesting the seed, but you've got an enormous amount of biological material that is useless to you. So they tried burning the dried wheat stems and it killed the algae. And that was totally unexpected. And it turns out when you burn, what they were thinking of is cellulose. They weren't thinking of the nitrogen. They weren't thinking of the nitrogen gases that would be given off would be toxic. So it's a good example where, in theory, you don't have to worry about these things, but in practice, you do. Biosphere 2, I think, gives us enormous amounts of information and data. They have over 200 publications. They recycled all of their water. At the time that I was preparing this, I was working primarily from this book, which is Life Under Glass. It has a fair amount of information on worm beds, and the worms were fed to the chickens, and they had water fern, which was fed to animals, including goats. The wastewater system, they had 3 tanks for human, well, they had a tank for human wastewater, they had a tank series for human wastewater, different tank series for animal and laboratory waste. That went into the plants. They were getting their drinking water 4,000 to 8,000 gallons per day from condensate. Now, this was a big system. This was a system that was taking care of 8 people. Lots and lots of data. Since then, I have been sent some references, and again, this is the wastewater garden approach used in a lot of different places. I throw this in just for historical. This was how I got involved in space biology. We were funded by Boeing Aircraft to use human fecal material to grow fish, and if you didn't feed the fish at all, of 30, only 7 lived, and they didn't grow. If we fed them human fecal material, there was some growth, not as much growth as when we fed shrimp, freeze-dried shrimp. And so human fecal material was of some use, but it was nutritionally inadequate, or we weren't feeding enough. I think there would be an enormous gift to Earth if we could adapt a recycling system that was cost efficient, and I'm hoping that this is what the space program is going to do. If we would stop dumping human waste into our aquatic environments, we would solve a lot of problems, including algal blooms. I just want to say a little bit about science fiction. Good Taste is an article where a cook wins an award using garlic that is grown in dirt at a time when this is regarded as unacceptable. All food is produced in computer-designed laboratories. Star Trek, they had a replicator that reduced all of the waste to individual elements and then reconstructed whatever food you wanted from your waste products. The Martian, which is another book that I've got here somewhere, this was a famous movie where he was able to use his waste products to stay alive. If you want to know what happens if a system fails, there's a award-winning video that's supposed to be quite a laugh called Trainwreck Poop Cruise. And this is a true story. In 2013, a ship power system failed. The toilets were non-functional, resulting in feces all over the place. And how the hell you make an award-winning documentary out of that, I have yet to learn. So I think the system can't fail. And I think the lunar system is supposed to be a test system for Mars. So yes, I'm consistently finding out that my ideas are wrong. Anyway, happy to answer any questions.
So, thank you for an interesting presentation, Frieda. If you were to design biological systems for a moon base, what are the basic challenges and opportunities you see based on early experiences?
Well, I mean, I'm very intrigued by the system that the European Space Agency has been working on. There's been a lot of research. I haven't kept up with it up to date, but it just seems to me that that is the approach that I would take. I probably would have a backup system that was based on things that had co-evolved. I mean, there's no reason that you couldn't have a duplicate system. You just have to keep feeding it so that these organisms. One of the theories is that bacteria don't die, that they just go inactive.
Right. Yeah. But what about aquaponic food cultivation systems? In a way, they are processing poo, even if it's fish poo, basically.
Well, no, but I mean, the biosphere, the project assumes, and I don't know how many studies they've done. I mean, the United States did a lot of studies on how efficiently can you produce food if you have ideal CO2, ideal water. I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on food production. So if you have processed wastes that are going to provide your nutrients, there's an enormous amount of research from NASA on food production.
Right.
You grow corn, you can grow wheat, you can grow radishes, you can grow lettuce, you can grow tomatoes. I mean, the whole agricultural field is very, very well developed. You're not starting from ground zero. And the sewage, you know, we have whole departments of civil engineering that deal with sewage. We really have, there are just a lot of things that are not developed on Earth because it's just cheaper to put it in the river.
Yes, indeed.
So I think that the bones of the research are there. How you're going to build that skeleton for your particular use. But the preliminary work is there and waiting for you.
Okay, thank you.
Frieda, I have a question about the air quality. So people, like in your house, people stink, and so there has to be some air turnover to keep the inside of your house clean. I don't understand that process very well in terms of in the natural system or in a closed system. How does the air get cleaned? Well,
I think the submarine technology, for example. I mean, the submarines approach being a closed ecological system. By the way, in the very early efforts, they also considered the chemistry of farting. And I don't see that in the more refined systems. But people give off gases. And there are technologies to handle these.
So, but I'm thinking in the natural context.
Then plants are assumed to take up all of the gases that we don't like.
So do they actually absorb those things through their leaves, or I don't get how it works actually. Like even on planet Earth.
I don't either, but the argument in many places is that if you have a garden, it will absorb all of the chemicals that you don't like to smell.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, my presentation next covers a little bit of that.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and the plants themselves are producing oxygen directly, so that it may be that just the stank smell and the presence of the diatomic oxygen might be enough to oxidize and break them down so that they aren't stinky. That's just a guess, though. I'm not sure.
I mean, the problem is you got to identify what the smell is made out of, right? And then figure out how you're going to process that.
But the torpedo, I'm not torpedo, the submarine people, have had to deal with that. Airplane people have had to deal with that. How much is processed by the bacteria that are associated with the roots of the plant, I don't know. We kind of assume that natural biota will take care of everything. And you can't bet on that when you're developing an artificial system.
But in many cases, bacteria can actually take care of lots of complex organic compounds the bacteria that are very close to root systems of plants.
Yep. Well, I mean, this was an example of the Russians burning wheat stem and finding out that there were toxic nitrogen products. I think Derek has his hand up.
Hey, Frieda, I was curious. Obviously, I'm new to this discipline in general, but if algae or tilapia or whatever are eating your feces and then you're eating those, isn't there going to be a significant amount or a certain amount of nutrient loss over time in that cycle? How do you handle that? I assume there's got to be some sort of, it can't be completely closed loop. You're adding something.
Well, I think that for a Mars system, there'll be the potential of resupply. It used to be every 2 years if they actually perfect some other rockets. I think it'll be every 4 months. I'm certain that for a lunar system, for example, people are going to send up computers. People are going to send up electronic gear. These are not going to be de novo systems where everything has to be designed on the moon or on Mars. These are going to be systems that will have continuous input, continuous output. I would just hate to think of enormous cesspools that are going to be ever accumulating larger volume because we don't know how to handle waste, and everybody's going to starve if you don't resupply food. So, if it's 90% recycling,
It's a big improvement.
cell phones are not going to be grown on the moon. They're going to be transported from Earth.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So you're correct that it's not going to be 100%. I mean, even in Biosphere 2, they brought in sophisticated electronics equipment to.
Right. And Derek, they'll probably bring in, you'll probably have to have an input of, carbon and nitrogen occasionally into any enclosed systems just to make up for loss and degradation.
Right.
That's
Well, I think that one of the proofs that Earth system is not completely regenerating is the fact that we've produced petroleum.
Yeah.
I mean, crude oil, or whatever it is that comes out of the Earth is organic material that was not recycled.
Well, I mean, and that's how Earth works, right? It's got huge buffers and huge reserves, whereas
Right.
An artificial habitat is going to have minuscule reserves and buffers, which makes things a lot more tricky.
We need to
But
build
I think they're going to build in supplies, and there's going to be a certain amount. Okay, one of the potential uses for algae will be to make plastic, and apparently these plastics you could recycle. They make shoes, for example, out of algal plastics. So, I mean,
Right.
This is one of the problems is that the very, very early systems, which, by the way, I did a review paper in 1974, the very, very early systems were all depending on algae to convert carbon dioxide to oxygen, and we haven't been able to find a really useful way of considering those algae as human food. By the way, there's an algal, ABO is the Algae Biomass Organization, and they have an enormous amount of literature on how to use algae for producing things like plastic and aviation fuels and food additives.
Frieda, the title of your presentation included the phrase yuck factor. Do you have any ideas on how to overcome the yuck factor when processing human waste?
I'm sorry, I'm missing the critical word.
The title of your presentation included the yuck factor. Yes?
Yeah.
The yuck, I don't know.
I'm sorry, somebody else needs to say it, and then maybe my hearing aids will pick it up.
Overcoming the yuck factor. It's the yuck
Yes.
it's talking about.
The yuck factor. Okay, so I don't know, how many of you have ever changed a dirty diaper?
I feel so. Most of us think I have done it. My question is, how do you overcome this yuck factor to get,
You talk to the civil engineers and they very quickly get into technical terms that you don't know what they mean, and therefore it doesn't bother you. So they talk about an anaerobic digester.
Yes.
Right,
I'm more interested in how do, let's say, ordinary people accept the use of, let's say, recycled wastewater or recycled human waste. I mean,
Well, we changed the terminology. I mean, they do it now on International Space Station. Most of their drinking water is from urine.
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
Right. Or we don't send ordinary people, right? We send people who are flexible enough to adapt to the situation.
That's another solution.
Oh, I mean, the first people who go to live on the moon or go to live on Mars, or people who are potentially living in a cabin that you're calling a Mars or a moon station, these are people who are adventuresome.
Mm.
But I mean, you want the drinking water to be, something acceptable. You don't want it to smell like urine.
Yeah, right.
I'd like to jump into education. So knowing a little bit about some of the basics like UV sterilization, to be able to actually look at lab data saying, hey, my fecal coliform counts are 0.
Mhm.
And of course the smell factor, which could be something very simple like a manganese oxide or a carbon air filter. You're pulling those smells and removing some of those things that really just make you want to gag. So between education
some of those chemicals that make you want to gag, you want to talk to the people who design perfumes, because some of those chemicals at very low concentrations smell desirable. It's at high concentration, and our association with fecal material, like changing dirty diapers. So that technology is pretty damn advanced.
There's
The
also
submarine people had to overcome this problem a long time ago.
there's also the fact that the human senses are good at filtering out background
Yes.
information. My dad served in subs during World War II, and when they were on a long mission, they didn't notice the smell. But when you actually got back and left the sub, all of a sudden you notice just how hideously it smelled.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, has implications for tourism.
Mhm.
I mean, the long-term residents may not notice the fact of the smells, but tourists will.
Yeah, that's very, very true. I've heard it referred to as nasal fatigue.
Mhm.
The same thing on the farms with iodine and manure. You don't smell it after a couple of days, but if you leave and come back, there it is.
Yeah. But I think it's important to know that you're not starting at ground zero. There's a lot of information out there.
Can I mention something about the yuck factor? As an anthropologist, I've done an awful lot of reading about tribal people. And there are women, postpartum women, who eat their own placenta because it's so nutritious. They need to get the food back into their system. They also eat their children's feces. And
I don't know that.
it's just true. And you find this among other apes too. It's a matter of nutrition and a matter of getting enough food into your body to survive and to produce the milk that your baby suckles. So, we're just so hyper
you see cats and dogs. You see cats and dogs eating feces.
Yeah. I mean, give me a break. Come on, guys.
And for young children, you really have to teach them not to play with their feces.
Right.
So, when you're toilet training a toddler, you kind of embed in them that yuck, You don't play with this.
Yeah, and I think that is probably a good